The NFL draft is in the rearview mirror finally. The Colts got a haul with 8 picks during the big time of the year. How might each pan out? What can we expect? And how did you, the fans, perceive? And what do you think of Chris Ballard's work? Well, let's talk about it. Welcome to the Horseshoe Huddle Podcast, brought to you by Indianapolis Colts on SI.com. I am Drake Wally, deputy editor of the site and co-host of the show. And then, of course, I'm joined by Noah Gebert, analyst for the site and fellow co-host of the show. Noah, we are finally in it's behind us. The NFL draft is finally done. The Indianapolis Colts, as expected, did a trade back, but they didn't do it as early as people might have thought they would. And a lot of good things happened. Some things fell in their lap. But how we doing, man? How was the weekend? And what did you think of what I consider a haul by the Indianapolis Colts?
Yeah, I think this is an awesome episode that we're about to have because we did that whole live stream during the entire round one that lasted for about 4 hours. All the people that were there watching that, thank you for joining in on that. Because there was a lot of you throughout the entire. Once we got to pick 32, people started to drop off a little bit and say they were going to bed because it was about midnight, which is understandable. But Drake, you and I haven't talked since the end of that stream, so we haven't discussed any of the picks from rounds 2 through 7. We went into a little bit on Tyler Warren, but now even then we've gotten this whole weekend to kind of sit back, reflect, collect our thoughts, and gather everything on that. And then we have all these 7 other prospects that ended up being Indianapolis Colts that we get to talk about. So I'm pumped.
Yeah, this is going to be very interesting to see how these guys pan out. But at the end of the day, they were able to get so much. I think that they addressed dang near every single position in a way. Maybe some not as early as some might have hoped, and others a little bit, a little bit too early. So we're going to break down each one of these, but we do have a couple of chats that we got to get to. This first one here is it's, the CFO, Patrick Rye. The only Wally I need on this team is Drake Wally. Patrick has made it very clear that there is a certain draft pick that he is not a fan of. So we will get to that one later. But thank you so much, Patrick, for joining, and thank you so much for the super chat. You're the best as always. Then we have Truett here throwing in a $2 super sticker. And we'll go ahead and highlight his comment here. I'm so excited for this year. It seems like Ballard felt the heat and swallowed his pride. I believe we can really compete for the division or worst, or the playoffs. I mean, hey, you know what, Truett? If that happens, if they actually win the division and they make the playoffs, that means one of two things. It means either Daniel Jones had a career resurgence or Anthony Richardson figured it out, at least to a degree. So we'll have to see. It's all about that quarterback position because, one of the guys we're going to get to can't have a huge impact if the quarterbacks aren't better. So we'll have to see. But that's going to be a good one. Yim, thank you so much for joining. Tracy, Wyatt, Chet, we're going to get to all you guys. Sean Conkright, Tony, all you guys, thank you so much. So without further ado, we are going to go ahead and jump into this. So this first pick was very stressful if you were really, really hoping for it, especially the way that the board fell. But we're just going to jump right into it. So obviously, pick number 14, round 1, Tyler Warren was taken by the Indianapolis Colts. So basically, when Colston, so for those who didn't see the draft for some reason, Colston Loveland was taken at 10. All right. And when you heard tight end, I remember Andrew was on the episode. He's like, the Bears have taken a tight end. And you're like, oh, that's Tyler Warren. Mm-hmm. And then it was Colston Loveland, which kind of blew my mind. I don't know if there was any mock draft that I read that had him going before Tyler Warren. I'll tell you that. That was kind of shocking. Before we even dive into it, what was your reaction when the Bears decided to take Colston Loveland? Maybe they didn't want to get a bona fide tight end one, like an undisputed guy, because Cole Kmet's still on the team. Maybe they wanted a dual threat thing. But what did you think of that? Because I'm still kind of surprised that Colston Loveland went before Tyler Warren. 4 spots also.
Yeah, I was a little surprised. Not too surprised. I think you and I were both in the mind that Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland kind of operated within the same tier of tight end, and it was a little bit of a pick your flavor of what you wanted. But we weren't sure that the league felt that way, and I guess that was true for at least the Chicago Bears sitting there at 10, where they had the opportunity to grab Warren or Loveland, and they went with the arguably the higher upside, more pure pass catcher in Colston Loveland, and left Tyler Warren sitting there, who, despite our love for Colston Loveland going into the draft, Drake, we I think can sit there and recognize Tyler Warren maybe was schematically even a little bit of a better fit if you don't necessarily think he has as high of an upside. And yeah, obviously the number one need on the team falls right in their laps with who most people would consider the top player at that position. So I don't think it could have gone better for the Colts. I think in that post draft or that post round one press conference, Chris Ballard was saying there was really no consideration of trading up. They felt pretty comfortable with where they were at, sitting there at 14. I'm sure there were some other guys, if Tyler Warren wasn't there, that they would have been happy to select there. But they said that the pro scouts in the organization had done their work, and they felt pretty comfortable that Tyler Warren or Colston Loveland would fall to them at that pick, and that's what ended up happening.
Yeah, and it was yet again. It just proves that sometimes you just have to sit there. It's really good that they. I think this was said by Jake Arthur on Locked On Colts. It's really good that they didn't overthink this pick.
Mhm.
All right, they didn't like go with another position. I mean, look, were there players that could have had an impact on the Colts and that the Colts need in positions or that were in positions of need? Sure, okay, but I've wrote this multiple times over and over again before the draft. Nothing even comes close to tight end. No position came close to how bad they needed this pick. And just to rehash it for those who weren't in the know, which at this point I'm sure that you know this stat and it's burned in the back of your head like it is mine. But four Colts tight ends couldn't even get over 40 catches last year. Tyler Warren's probably going to have, if he even has like 50, 60 catches, you are elated at that.
Mhm.
And so this was dire need because you had Mo, who's the red zone guy, the blocking guy, not an impact receiver. Drew Ogletree caught 9 passes last season. Kylan Granson is gone, but he was more of your move guy who just had no rapport or no connection with Anthony Richardson last year. And then, of course, you had Will Mallory, who even knows? And then there's Jelani
Mhm.
Woods, who you and I are pretty much in agreement that you can't even consider him a tight end on the roster right now
Yeah.
until he does something. So, in short, this was huge. This was everything they needed. And I mean, what are your thoughts on what he could potentially do in year one? Because I'm sure a guy like Shane Steichen can figure out many ways to use this guy.
Yeah, I think this is the first time in a long time the Colts have had that true three down tight end at the position. I keep track of a Colts depth chart, and I split up this tight end group as Y tight ends and F tight ends, and I put Tyler Warren in as an F tight end, but really he is the tight end. Like he's both. He's the starting Y and he's the starting F. So just moved him over there because when you go to a two tight end set, you're probably bringing Mo Alley Cox or Drew Ogletree in as a blocker, and that allows you to move Tyler Warren around in some more of those slot positions, wingback positions, back in the backfield. Yeah, and even on in line on the other side of the ball. So yeah, you've got a lot of options here, and I think that really opens up the offense compared to the personnel that you had at tight end last year and the year before, and you've been kind of just trying to string together these groups and do it by committee, which I think works if you have the personnel to do it, but the Colts just haven't had the horses to do it. To have both roles filled effectively, and now essentially you fill both roles with one guy, which I think really unlocks things, makes you feel a little bit more comfortable when you're into really at all three downs and you're making these play calls with third or with the 11 personnel. You feel comfortable that Tyler Warren's able to get in there and block and wall guys off, and you can still use him creatively in the running game, and then you can get him out there as a pass catcher and he can be reliable as well. So that really opens up the playbook for you, regardless of the personnel that you have on the field.
Yeah, and it's exciting to think that a guy who won the Mackey Award, is a part of the Indianapolis Colts offense. I mean,
Mhm.
Shane Steichen, in his previous ventures with the Chargers and with the Eagles, he had Hunter Henry, he had Dallas Goedert, so he's had a couple of guys that are. I mean, Dallas Goedert's I think sometimes can be a great tight end.
Mhm.
Is he otherworldly? Is he a superstar? No, but he is a starting tight end, a legitimate starting tight end. So I think this is huge. But just to rehash Tyler Warren's absolutely bonkers season. He had 104 catches, 1,233 receiving yards, 8 touchdowns, had another 4 touchdowns on the ground. Yeah, in short, I think that this is probably a guy kind of like what Yim says. We'll see. I mean, you can't say anything too early because you
Mhm.
never know how people are going to play or how players are going to play when they're rookies. But I think Warren will transcend the offense out of the gate. Look, if he can control the middle of the field, if he can control the short game, and he can be used in some interesting ways now and again, he's going to impact the offense in a
Yeah.
positive way
Yeah.
because the Colts just didn't have this.
Yeah, I
So.
think that's one thing we're going to focus on in year one when you're watching him is you're not expecting him to go out and have 1,000-yard Brock Bowers type season. Uh, I think the impact will be more felt as a blocker in the run game and the way that you can do things creatively with him and scheme up some touches. I don't think that's going to be necessarily a volume thing. I think one of the big debates that we had with Colston Loveland and Tyler Warren is we felt that Colston Loveland was more of like this vertical threat at tight end, which when you're thinking about the quarterbacks that the Colts have, or mainly with Anthony Richardson, you're like, he's more of a vertical guy. Maybe he needs somebody to rip it up into the seam. And Tyler Warren can do that, but Colston Loveland, I think, would be more of that guy. But really, maybe we were thinking about that incorrectly and thinking that, hey, if we have a guy that has trouble hitting these layups and these short and intermediate routes, get him a pass catcher that's really reliable at creating that separation and bodying guys away and contested possession catches and really help your quarterback out in that way instead of necessarily playing to strengths.
Yeah, and look, just to kind of put a bow on it, it's going to be one of those. He's going to have to get adjusted to the NFL speed.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to have to do all that stuff, but he's just got. Not to take it again from Jake Arthur on their most recent episode of Locked On Colts, but he did stuff in college, and this is true, that you just don't see tight ends doing.
Yeah.
I mean, he really did. And, it's not often that you have a tight end that takes 26 carries or runs a quarterback roll out of the backfield or is throwing passes that game against USC, ladies and gentlemen, go look at his highlights from just that game. He was the entire offense. And he was incredibly unstoppable. So it's going to be awesome. I predict at least 50 catches for Tyler Warren. But actually, one more comment right here. Where's that at? Don't think Warren will have as many catches yards as Loveland or Bowers, but he does think he'll have more explosive plays. He also blocks better than both of them. So he's going to be used more in the run game. Colts are still going to have a heavy running attack.
They need to.
Yeah, they can't air it out really with either quarterback, or now a third quarterback as well. But thank you so much, Chet. That's actually a really good comment, and I think that it's good to put out expectations. Very unlikely that Tyler Warren is going to supplant Brock Bowers' absolute inferno of a rookie year. But there are 7 other picks that we got to get to. We're already 12 minutes in, so this next one was. I didn't even think about this pick at all. And I thought about the pick, just not the player at all. And it absolutely blew my mind. So JT, I think it's Tuimoloau or Tuimoloau. Tuimoloau. That's way easier to say than what I've been trying. So this is a guy that is a national champion. So he already has been a part of a winning program. And when you talk about this guy, it's just somebody that, a lot of people probably, there were multiple people that had him going to the Colts, but I think when his name was called, some people were like, who's that?
Yeah.
Well, this guy was an absolute monster last year. He had multiple games where he just, from a defensive edge position, took over the entire game. So tell me a little bit about your reaction when it was JT Tuimoloau. Say it again.
Tuimoloau.
Tuimoloau. When it was JT Tuimoloau, what was your reaction? What did you think about the pick? And, just tell me a little bit about, what you think of his fit with Lou Anarumo.
Yeah, I think maybe we should have considered Lou Anarumo a little bit more than we did leading up into this draft cycle, because I think we both were talking about edge being a sneaky need for the Colts and how there was nobody on the roster outside of Latu that would be under contract at the end of this season. So maybe you were hoping Kwity Paye would be that guy, but that's going to be somebody that you have to pay. And I think this gives you some insurance I think you can pay Kwity Paye, no pun intended, and still it wouldn't be redundant to have Tuimoloau out because you always need more rushers. But also if you're in the situation where you don't want to give out that contract to Kwity Paye coming off this 5th-year option, then Tuimoloau is a good contingency plan there to end up starting there in year 2. But yeah, in terms of just the fit of the player, those metrics aren't necessarily what we envisioned Chris Ballard going after. He's more of like the long, bendy, explosive, like vertical jump, score, obviously kind of guys. And we had a couple other names that were pinned to that. Donovan Ezeraku, who went just before the Colts pick, was one of those guys. even James Pierce Jr., who was a controversial pick in the first round, was one of those guys that kind of fit those metrics. Uh, but really, I think last year when they picked Latu, they demonstrated a little bit of a shift away from that kind of mindset there at edge rusher specifically. And while Latu's an explosive athlete in his own right and Bindi in his own right, it wasn't necessarily up to those athletic standards that he had held previous picks, the Kamoka Toures, Ben Banagus, those kind of guys at defensive end. I mean, he's invested a lot at defensive end, so it's hard to really say with confidence that he's hitting the nail on the head at that position, and his hit rate just hasn't been great at edge rusher. So maybe it was good that he switched up his kind of stance on how he views and what he prioritizes at the position, both with Latu and Tui Maloau.
Yeah, and Tui Maloau has the potential to really make a massive impact. And I know that it's been said multiple times in here. Chet says, Donovan Azaraku, he was disappointed that he went right before the Colts to the Cowboys. Now that's very fair, but when you consider what they're still getting with Tui Maloau, they're getting a powerful rusher. They're getting a guy who can make things happen. But yes, Azaraku I think he would have been a great fit for the Colts. And Patrick, to answer your question, I would not be surprised if the Colts would have taken Ezeraku. I don't know. I thought that he was a perfect fit for the team if they're looking for defensive edge. But that's just one of those things where you'll never know. You'll never know now. He was taken earlier than the Colts could even hope to get him. I mean, they're not going to trade up to get Donovan Ezeraku. But just a very brief rundown of what JT Tuimoloau can do is last year he had 51 quarterback pressures. That was only second to Jack Sawyer with 64. The guy also had 12.5 sacks. He had 22 tackles for loss on 61 total tackles. Over a third of his tackles were in the backfield. You look at his tape, he just overpowers offensive linemen, and he has a unique blend of also being able to use his hands quickly. So, I mean, he's got a lot of tools, and the biggest thing, though, is his power. I think that he's going to have maybe a little bit of a different experience because he's going to be going against offensive tackles in the NFL. But Tui Maloau has the potential, especially with Louis Anarumo, who loves his edge rushers, and he's seen what an elite one looks like. I think that he's got the potential to go out there and maybe have a better rookie season, dare I say, if he gets enough snaps than Latu. I mean, who knows? Latu's rookie season, I do have to say this, and you can elaborate a little bit more on it. We're not saying that he had a bad rookie season, because the intention was for him to rotate in with Ebicom. That didn't happen. And Odengbo wasn't this outrageous sack machine, even though he led the team in pressures. So Latu was tasked with a lot more than I think the Colts wanted him to be. But what were your thoughts on Latu's rookie season overall? And do you think that Tui Maloau could be – I mean, it's good to have them both, but do you think that there's a chance that maybe he takes snaps away somehow from Laiatu Latu, or do you think that they're going to try to use them in unison? Because I think that would honestly be ideal, especially if Tui Maloau hits the ground running.
Yeah, I don't worry too much about him taking away snaps from Latu. I think he's right on track in terms of the development that they wanted Latu to have. So think he'll just see an increase in terms of third down pass rushing snaps. Even when you do have Samson Ebukam back, I think just by nature of it being his second season and the investment that they have in him and kind of the promise that they believe he can fulfill at the pass rush position, he's going to get those pass rush snaps. But I think Tui Maloau really complements him really well. I think Latu had this thing where he had a really high pass rush win rate against relative to other rookies in the NFL last season. Just wasn't able to finish sacks very often. And Tui Maloau is kind of the opposite, where he's a really good finisher on these effort rushes, but his just pure win rate's not as high. And he's going to be more of this staunch run defender, while Latu's going to be this pure pass rusher. And I think they really are going to play each other really well. And then one thing that Tui Maloau has that Latu doesn't is they've mentioned his ability to jump inside on pass rushing downs, on third downs, and jump in there and do that kind of Dio Adengbo thing that he was doing last year on third downs, where he's bumping into that 3 tech or that 5 tech to rush from the interior. And really allow you to bring another speed rusher around the outside, so you could keep Kwity Paye and Latu on the field. You could keep Kwity Paye or Latu and Samson Ebukam on the field and still have Tui Maloau rushing from the interior. And I think that's something that they really needed was after the departure of Dio Adengbo and all the snaps that he got last season, led the team in pressures like you've mentioned before. You needed to replace that production somehow. So you got somebody who can on base downs be on the edge like Dio Dengbo was, and somebody that can bump inside. We'll have to see kind of how much he gets used in that role. Tyquan Lewis is another guy in the roster that can do that and can bump inside, so maybe they prefer him to be in there and keep Tui Maloau on the edge, especially in his rookie year. Maybe they want to simplify things a little bit. But yeah, I mean, high motor, tough guy with a lot of experience and a ton of production, and I expect that to translate pretty immediately in the NFL.
Yeah, and it'll be. I think it'll be a good season for him. And even if he has like three, I mean, you'd hope that he has more than 3 or 4 sacks.
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to be. I'm intrigued to see how he fits in because they already had Ebukam and Lewis and Paye and Latu. And those are some. That's a nice group of players right there. And then I think we had a question. Yeah, Tony Pelletieri asked about Isaiah Land contributing on the depth chart right now. Let's see. Yeah, so he's sitting behind. So you got this is just our lads, but it's got Kwity Paye, Latu, who's I'm not sure if that's accurate, but they have Isaiah Land third from the left side. And then it's Ebukam, Tui Maloau, and Lewis. So
Yeah.
I will have to see.
Yeah.
I think that he'd be more edge, like an edge rotation somehow.
Yeah. I think he's pushing edge 5-6 is what his battle will be going into training camp, and that's really on the edge of making the roster or not, depending on what they do with defensive line. I know they like to keep around 10 on the offensive line or on the defensive line, so maybe you do keep 6 edge rushers and 4 on the interior, and then you just have that flexibility with Tui Maloau and Lewis that can bump inside, which can justify only keeping 4 defensive tackles. So I think, yeah, you could see him. I think they like him quite a bit. So that I think they will keep him on the roster if they have the flexibility to do that. Then once you're on the roster, really at defensive line, you're going to have chances to contribute just with how much you get rotated to that position. So I don't necessarily expect him to see a huge influx of snaps. I guess we'll see where Ebukam is with his recovery. I think they kind of play a super similar position where if Ebukam needs a little bit more time to recover all the way, or he's not playing up to his potential after the Achilles tear, then Land's a guy that can take some of those snaps.
Yeah, I mean that's going to be a big one. Is we'll have to see how Ebukam recovers because when he was healthy, he was awesome. I mean, he was really good for the Colts. Okay, so this next one really surprised me. I'm a little bit happier about it now that I've kind of looked into it and wrote a piece on it. But this one, number 80, third round, and it was Minnesota Golden Gopher cornerback Justin Wally. Now, this one, yes, Patrick says, can we just skip this one? No, we can't skip any of these. We have to talk about this one. Gut reaction. I'm going to pass it to you first. Gut reaction when you found out it was a cornerback and one that is, I think, ranked around this area. So I think he was like projected as a 3rd or 4th rounder, maybe a 5th rounder. But what are your thoughts on Justin Wally? Because go listen to Chris Ballard talk about him. Chris Ballard is in love with this pick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on the consensus big board, at least, he was quite a bit lower. So I think if you're looking at draft grades that are just base value or really only value that kind of model, you're going to see a pretty low grade for the Justin Wally selection. I think what essentially when you go against the consensus there, then you are kind of banking on your own or you're showing your confidence in your ability to scout guys ahead of what other guys have, which I think it generally gets you in trouble, right? I think it's hard for general managers and scouting staffs to admit to not knowing what they don't know. Right, and I think that can get you in some trouble. But I do like the boldness of going out and getting a guy that's been mocked in the 5th and the 6th as your 3rd round pick. I'm personally a fan of that just in general. I like when you go out and you get a guy, and this was clearly a theme with the first 2 picks as well, of tough guys who've been experienced with the program and have been productive in college, team captains. They've went with this theme for the first 3 picks because I think they were trying to genuinely like establish a backbone and add some toughness to the room that Chris Ballard has mentioned. And I think they do that with this pick. All this time going into it, I kind of felt that cornerback was still a need on the roster, just because you had nobody behind Kenny Moore. They have Corey Ballantyne and Sam Womack, who outside of special teams have only played on the outside in their NFL careers at least. Juju Brents, Jalen Jones only played on the outside in their careers. Charvarius Ward might follow some people into the slot, but he's going to be primarily on the outside as well. So you just had Kenny Moore on your roster that could fill in and play the slot, no matter how much they want to talk about the Nick Cross's ability to do that. But yeah, so even if he's going to be primarily on the outside, which I think is a possibility. Chris Ballard said he could be an inside or outside kind of guy. If Kenny Moore goes down, this is immediately the guy that's going to be jumping in there at that starting nickel spot. And I think that was important so you can maintain the versatility that you have and that flexibility you have on the defensive end, like Lou Anarumo likes to employ. They mentioned, like, if you want to have that flexibility to still have Charvarius Ward follow a guy, if you've got Justin Wally on the roster, if Kenny Moore goes down, you don't lose that. You can still have Justin Wally go out and play on the outside in some situations the same way Kenny Moore would. So I do think that was valuable, and that was an underrated need, despite it being a crowded cornerback room. I'm not necessarily sure that it is. I'm not sure the reliance on Juju Brents is super high within the organization, especially with this pick. I think he's very much in the situation where he's fighting for a roster spot with Corey Ballantyne and Sam Womack coming into training camp. Just by nature, you have Charvarius Ward, Jalen Jones, Kenny Moore, Justin Wally. That's already four that are well ahead of all of those guys. And then cornerback five's got to be a guy that can play special teams, you would think. And that's both Sam Womack and Corey Ballantyne, and to this point, not Juju Brents. So despite the love that Chris Ballard has had for Juju Brents in the past, this is a new defensive staff that values different things at the cornerback position, namely long speed, which I think if you remove Juju Brents from the equation, really you're only looking at Jalen Jones as the other guy that doesn't have that long speed on the defensive backfield.
Those were absolutely like on the dot points because we've talked about it a lot, but it needs to be brought up a lot as well. And that is that I think it's either, I don't have it in front of me, but it's like 10 or 11 games that Juju Brents has played over 2 years, and 9 of those came in his rookie year. So he is so much on the ropes for a roster spot. Like, I don't think that people, maybe they do, but I would assume people don't grasp just how close he is to not being a factor at all. Like, and so you saying that he's fighting for a spot with Corey Ballantyne, that's not an exaggeration. It's just not. I mean, they brought Corey Ballantyne onto the team for a reason, So I think the fact that they picked Justin Wally, that makes sense. And, he stuck out, for being a potential guy behind Kenny Moore. And, he had a 71.1 coverage grade. He had a good run defense grade. So the guy can stick his nose in the run game. And he also, I believe, through his 4 seasons as a Golden Gopher, he had 155 tackles, 113 of those all by himself, 27 passes defended, a defensive score, and 1 defensive score on 1 of 7 total interceptions. And I even put that it's not enthralling, but the draft grade is still somewhat respectable for a full position room. So based off of bodies alone, looks full. But yeah, you can't bank on Ballantyne and Brents anymore. So I didn't like the pick at first. And Patrick makes a great point. Where was that at? There's 2 comments I got to highlight here. They still could have signed a cheap vet slot corner depth piece. Mike Hilton stood out to me, just saying it was a Lou Anarumo guy, had done well under Lou Anarumo, a veteran, don't got to worry about the rookie complex that might happen, may or may not. Maybe Lou's fixed something. But I like let's just say this. I like the pick now. I mean, go look at his tape. He's got some good ability to break up passes. I think he's going to have an impact in the slot, but that's not a bad thing to say, Patrick, because they got a good defensive tackle we'll talk about later. And I think they got him at a pretty good price, if you will, but they definitely, I think they should have gone offensive guard. I also think that means they have a lot of confidence in Matt Gonsalves, and I think that's what they're going to do. But yeah, that's an interesting comment right there. And then there was one more. Let's see. Okay, this can also work. I thought it was weird that we didn't trade Juju Brents after the Wally pick from our draft capital. I mean, the thing is, Chet, you can't swap out. You got to keep Juju Brents, because what if the off chance the guy stays healthy and he realizes that second round potential?
Yeah,
That's
that's
pretty
somebody
great.
you might look at dealing it at training camp come cut time. Sam Womack, Juju Brents could be in the same boat. Patrick R. I'll also mention, I don't know if this was the comment that you were trying to find earlier, of taking a cornerback 4 or 5 in the third is quite a choice. I'd argue that's a good choice. Remember that cornerback 4 is one snap away from being a starting corner on your team, especially with Chris Ballard even admitting there in his press conference that the base defense is a 4-2-5. You've got 5 DBs on the field pretty much at all times in Lou Anarumo's defense, so you've got 3 corners on the line, and like taking away this season, even if he is just cornerback 4, which I would argue with spending a third round pick on cornerback 4 is a good move. You've got Kenny Moore and Charvarius Ward are both in their age 29 season coming up. So you have to do some future proofing. I know we talk about how this is the make or break year. They have to impact now, and I think this is a pick that impacts now and gives you something to look forward for in the future at the cornerback position. So I would say third round is a pretty good investment at that spot. I mean, it's a little bit harder to justify when you're looking at some of the other needs on the roster, but cornerback 4 is very much. I agree more with the pick of the cornerback position than I do the cornerback himself in Justin Wally, just because I'm not a talent evaluator. I don't scout film. I'm not going to try to stack these guys against other guys, but just based off of where the consensus rank was and where you selected him, there's a little bit of a deficit there. So I do worry that you maybe reached a little bit on a guy like that, but I'm definitely not going to be the one to argue with Chris Ballard and that scouting staff about that, because I'm not watching and evaluating these guys. But yeah, as far as process and position, I'm on board.
Yeah, and there was a comment that I was waiting a super chat that I was waiting to show, because Patrick, we have to cover each one of these guys. If I send this, we can skip it. I'm sorry. I mean, I apologize if it was able to be skipped, I would do it just for you, pal. But at the end of the day, I mean, yeah, they could have probably used an offensive guard, but again, I think that with the guy that we'll talk about here soon, mixed with the fact that, I mean, Matt Gonsalves they traded up for this guy. And I did think that maybe they'll draft a guy to start or compete with a veteran, maybe to start at right guard. Maybe they'll let Gonsalves kind of swing back and forth for one more season as the swing tackle again. But I think they're ready to thrust him into a starting role.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they're ready. I think that last year he played over 500 snaps between left and right tackle. Wasn't supposed to do that, but he did it, and he did it respectfully. So respectably, I think. So we'll have to see. But I mean, hey, I understand people's chagrin to this pick, because I think a lot of people didn't think that they needed it. So, but yeah, this next one, I'm actually pretty excited about this one, just because I do believe that he could have an impact later on, even though he's a fourth rounder, and that is Iowa State's Jalen Travis. So this was your offensive line pick. This was the guy that was essentially tasked with being the swing tackle. I don't think that the Colts have as much confidence in Blake Freeland anymore. I think it's pretty clear after this pick. What were your thoughts on this pick? I had him going in the 6th round in my mock draft. Of course, I also used PFF Simulator, so who knows if he fell. But I had him going to the Colts just because I thought that they could use a swing tackle. So what are your thoughts on this pick? This is a guy who has the size and the ability. I know Blake Freeland's also a 4th rounder, but he has the size and ability to potentially supplant and fill in for Braden Smith, forever. For how long? Inevitably when he becomes a free agent next year.
Yeah, I think saw this coming, not necessarily the player, but the position, and I think we were waiting on that possibility round 1, possibility round 2, possibility round 3. You get to round 4, you're like, finally, there it is. We knew there was going to be an offensive line selected at some point, and it very much it wasn't the guard that we've been projecting, right? Because we've kind of thought that maybe they'd prefer Gonsalves to stay there at swing tackle, and you get a starter in right guard at right guard in the draft, and then your depth is looking good and your starting line is looking good, and you kind of feel good everywhere. I guess just how the board fell, they ended up going in the fourth round. So I don't necessarily think this impacts the starting lineup at all in any way coming this or for this upcoming season. But this is very much a guy in the mold of those developmental tackles that they'd like to pick. Your Blake Freelands, your Jake Witts, a guy who's 6'8", 330 pounds, and moves pretty well. Just somebody that you don't expect really to make an impact in year one, but at the same time, at this point, unless they make an addition at right guard and bump Matt Gonsalves back out to tackle, he is one snap away from being a starting tackle, which is a position that Blake Freeland found himself in, is a position Bernard Ryman found himself in. I mean, they've had to lean on rookie tackles early in their careers in the past few years, so I wouldn't be surprised if he sees some time on the field. And I'm not super excited about it because I want to see him sit back there and develop, because I think this is more of a long-term prospect than something that would help immediately in the short term. So yeah, I do want to see them still try to sign somebody that can compete there at right guard. Maybe not somebody who's going to outright take that spot from Matt Gonsalves, but somebody who you can at least entertain the thought of moving in there to right guard and having Gonsalves bump out to tackle. That way you're not forced to put Jalen Travis in there. You never want a day 3 rookie to start at one of the most important positions on the offense. That's never going to be a good plan going into the season. So I think they want to avoid that. There's still room to add on the offensive line. I'm surprised they didn't do it with an earlier pick, to be honest. But just how it fell, I like the pick in the fourth round. You're not going to. I know we've talked up the interior line class, but you're not really going to get a guy that you feel super confident starting at any of the 5 spots on the offensive line there in round 4. So they took what best they could. I know tackle was going to be a need regardless, even if guard was a little bit higher of a need. So I'm not mad at this pick at all.
Yeah, and Yim, we will get to your super chat late, we'll get to your super chat later in the show. But thank you so much for the $5, man. You're the best. I hope you have a wonderful night. Thank you so much for tuning in, as always, my friend. So Jalen Travis, 475 pass blocking snaps. Okay, he was the highest rated pass blocking offensive lineman for the Iowa State Cyclones, but he only allowed 1 sack. He only allowed 2 quarterback hits, 475 offensive pass snaps, and he played strictly at left tackle, which makes a lot of sense. Yep. But he's going to be a swing guy. I do think that there could be improvement in his running attack, in his run blocking, but it's also he's just such a massive guy, and he's just so long. He's like 6'8". I mean, so he's going to have to learn how to shrink his arms just a little bit. He's going to have to learn how to be a little bit more of an enforcer in the running attack, because, hey, man, the Colts are going to run the ball a lot. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. I mean,
it's a smart guy. I think this goes back to kind of the theme that they've been doing. Smart, tough guy with a ton of experience. 4 years at Princeton, then another 2 at Iowa State. Was it 1 at Iowa State or 2 at Iowa State? Either way, a lot of college football he's got, and Chris Ballard also loves those guys that transfer up in competition, going from the Ivy League into Iowa State's program. So yeah, just somebody that they think the arrow's pointing up, and not somebody I don't think I want to see him in year 1. I don't think the Colts want to see him in year 1 getting any serious action. But yeah, something you can build on for the future, especially when you're coming up on next year and you're unsure about Braden Smith's contract situation and what's going to happen there. And what's up in the air with where Gonsalves is going to end up playing. Good to have this guy on your roster. Still room to add at the offensive line, though.
Yeah, and I like it. I do like this pick a lot. So the next one here is, I also really like this pick, and we'll just jump right into it. It's running back from Kansas State, DJ Giddens. So this one is and this, we also forgot to say that the Colts traded away the 117th pick, so they got another one later on. But DJ Giddens, so there was plenty of running backs that the Colts could have taken. I think that you would have had to probably take some of these guys earlier. But this is a really good pick, because he can he's a little bit of a bigger back, but the thing is, you didn't necessarily want just a pass catcher, but you also didn't just want some bruiser like Ollie Gordon. Okay, so they kind of got a nice little blend here. He's not this otherworldly pass catcher, but he did have 29 catches in 13 games in 2023 with the Wildcats. But it's just, again, I love seeing college players and NFL players too, that when you look at their body of work, it just keeps getting better.
Mm-hmm.
518 rushing yards, 1,226 rushing yards, 1,343 rushing yards. He averaged 5.8, 5.5, 6.6 yards per carry. I mean, that's incredible. And then he also had over 10 yards per reception, which for a running back, that's damn good. Okay, like so they're catching the ball short most of the time. These guys aren't running long routes most of the time, unless you're Christian freaking McCaffrey. So it's like, this is a guy that is going to compete with Khalil Herbert. I think that his skill set, I think that his upside, I think he could beat out Khalil Herbert. Okay,
Yep.
so what are your thoughts on DJ Giddens? I I personally love this pick just because it finally gives Jonathan Taylor,
Mhm.
hopefully, somebody that can help him out a little bit, give the defense a different look, so he's not taking 25, 30 carries a game.
Yeah, Giddens is a fun player, and this is another one of those positions where you're sitting there all draft waiting to see. You feel like they're going to take one at some point just because the depth of the RB room. Uh, Tony mentioned that he was wondering why he didn't go earlier. I think that's just a product of how deep this running back class was. There were a lot of running
Yeah.
backs taken. There's only so many teams that are going to take one. So you get a guy that maybe has a little bit higher value there sitting there in round 5. Fun to watch, though, and I think really in terms of running style, I know there's been comparisons to Marlon Mack in the Indy Draft Guide. It's Marlon
Yeah.
Mack a lot, and I'm not gonna say he runs like Jonathan Taylor, but there was that play, that walk-off touchdown that Jonathan Taylor had against the Patriots. There's a couple plays when you're watching DJ Giddens, specifically against Shiloh Sanders at Colorado, where he just sets up a defender in the hole, jukes him, does a jump cut, and takes off. And I think he has that ability to take some plays to the house in the same way that Jonathan Taylor does, while maybe not necessarily being your workhorse guy who's going to be able to bowl over defenders as much as JT does, because I think he's a little bit more well-rounded. But yeah, DJ Giddens, I think, underrated and has a little bit more upside as a pass catcher than what he showed in college. This past season at Kansas State was playing with a wrist injury, which I think hampers his ability to catch the ball for sure. Probably hampers his ability in pass protection as well. And I know he didn't perform really well as a pass protector his last year at Kansas State either. But I think you get him fully healthy and get him in the NFL program, maybe he shows a little bit more upside as a pass protector. I'm surprised they didn't go with somebody who was a little bit more sure in pass protection, just because you're filling that gap of Trey Sermon, who was the guy that came in on pretty much every pass protecting snap. You sub Jonathan Taylor off because that's a massive hole in his game, and you need somebody on the roster to be able to do that. And right now it's Herbert, who's not really that great of a pass protector, and DJ Giddens, who maybe has some upside as a protector but hasn't really shown it at this point. But you're in a situation where you're going to have to put one of those two guys really in there, or suffer through Jonathan Taylor's woeful attempts at protecting the passer. So yeah, we'll see where the upside is in the passing game with DJ Giddens. But as a pure runner, I think he gives you a lot.
Yes, and look, there's the hands aren't really that, again, the hands aren't going to be mind-boggling, but the guy is going to give you a three down back type, a guy that can take a workload. That's what they wanted Trey Sermon to be. That's why they kept Trey Sermon an additional year. Okay, is because they felt like he could make it happen, and the guy couldn't average 3 yards a carry. And Tyler Goodson's just not that guy. Neither's Khalil Herbert. He's not a guy that is going to take 7, 8, 9 carries a game. He just isn't. So I do like that comp from Marlon Mack, though, because we all remember, everybody was wetting their pants over the idea of Jonathan Taylor and Marlon Mack, including myself, and then you see Marlon Mack get hurt in the first game of the season, and it's all Jonathan Taylor, and the rest is history. So this next pick, this one's probably going to be the one that hits home for most people. We'll just jump right to it. Number 189, the legend, Riley Leonard. Had a chance to see Riley at the Notre Dame Pro Day with Andrew Moore, Jake Arthur. He is not the greatest passer. He is a hell of a personality. He's going to be a great locker room guy. He's going to be a guy that's going to do whatever you tell him to do. He's going to be happy to do it in the locker room, and he's just going to help the team prepare and all that stuff. What were your thoughts on? I mean, it makes perfect sense because at the pro day, Shane Steichen and Riley Leonard went off to the side and talked together. And the previous pro day, it was Sam Hartman and Cliff Kingsbury. And where does Sam Hartman go? He goes to the Washington
Mhm.
Commanders. So that made a lot of sense. What are your thoughts on this pick? I don't Colts fans don't look at this and think that they've got their next quarterback of the future,
Yeah.
please.
Just pump the brakes on pretty much any starting this year, starting
Big
next
time.
year,
Yeah.
kind of talk that's going on because the Colts didn't draft him with that intention either. I know there's uncertainty at the top of the quarterback depth chart with Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones, and you're not sure if either of them are going to be on the roster next year. But even if neither of them are on the roster, you're still not starting Riley Leonard next year. So I think you go into there with that expectation that, yeah, you lost Sam Ellinger. I think you're hoping for a Sam Ellinger type rookie contract or career up to this point for Riley Leonard, somebody who can take those preseason snaps, honestly, and provide some good quarterback play to kind of scout your own receivers in both in training camp and during the preseason games. Somebody who can be on the scout team as a quarterback and emulate both mobile quarterbacks and pocket passers. That's just going to be his role. And yeah, you mentioned good locker room guy, great character by all accounts. And this was something that we saw coming. I think they were doing a lot of work on these late round quarterbacks. Jake Arthur was really on it. That he said if there was one guy that he thought was going to be a Colt, it was Riley Leonard, and it seemed like, at least in the interviews, that Riley Leonard was pretty convinced of it himself as well. Came out in that interview right after being drafted wearing a Colts hoodie and a Colts hat. It seemed like he was pretty well prepared for the possibility of being a Colt at the end of Saturday. So yeah, I think it was pretty well telegraphed. They picked out their guy. They know what they're getting in him. They like what they're getting when they're bringing him in. So yeah, I'm not a huge fan of just, I don't know, just I feel like safety 3, you know how I feel about the safety room. There was room to add somebody who would be an upgrade over some other people that are currently safety 3 on your roster, and I would have preferred that. But I don't have any issue in the 6th round going with somebody who can, in best case, be a solid backup for you.
Yeah, and so I like this question here from NFL Nerd. By the way, thanks for joining, my friend. Is Riley Leonard an upgrade over Jason Bean? It feels like the same guy. Yes. Jason Bean showed prowess in the preseason.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Sam Ellinger looked like a starting level quarterback in the preseason. You can't look too deep into the preseason, but Jason Bean's your practice squad QB.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's perfectly fine. If Jason Bean is starting for you, you have royally screwed up somehow, or you've had the worst luck imaginable.
Or Jeff Saturday is your coach.
Or Jeff Saturday is your coach, and you just switch quarterbacks every week. So yes, he's an upgrade, and I think that the Colts realized that. Otherwise, they would have not even thought about drafting a quarterback. They would have picked somebody up maybe off another practice squad,
Mm-hmm.
and they would have just had Jason Bean as the successor to Sam Ellinger. So this is your Sam Ellinger right here. This is who it is. It's Riley Leonard. So he, real quick, something that was really interesting. I believe he had 38 all-purpose touchdowns between passing 21 and rushing 17. Had over 900 rushing yards, over 2,800 passing yards. He dimed it up. He did a wonderful job at Notre Dame.
Yeah,
so.
I think that fits super well with just the style of offense that you're running also, where if you've got somebody in a pinch that needs to come in and run some goal line quarterback draws or some RPOs, I think he can do that in a pinch for you as well. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Well, we'll go ahead and get to this next one here. So the Indianapolis Colts needed a defensive tackle. They really felt like it wasn't a need early, or they felt like this next pick could really shine when maybe his draft stock or draft position doesn't show it. But that's Alabama alum Tim Smith. So this, in short, this is your run stopper. This is the kind of guy that the Colts needed. They have Neville Gallimore, but that's not a run stopper.
Yeah.
He is strictly not. He's not a gap plugger. He's going to go get pressure on the QB. He's going to sack the QB. What were your thoughts on this pick? I personally would have liked to see a defensive tackle taken a little sooner.
Yeah.
But I think that they're pretty high on Tim Smith. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I feel like we've kind of felt that way about a lot of these positions where we know they're coming. We would have, if we were in charge, and albeit without the scouting resources that the Colts have, would have taken some of these guys a little bit earlier just because that's the need that we evaluated on the roster. And I do think it was a big need on the roster, but at the same time, it is still going to be a rotational guy. Even at best, if you're drafting a guy in the first round, even he would be a rotational guy with Grover Stewart and DeForest Buckner on the roster still. So, yeah, this is someone who's not going to really give you anything in pass rush. He shouldn't be on the field at all when it comes to third down or third and long. And I would prefer a guy like Neville Gallimore, Adetomiwa Adebawore, Tuimoloau Lewis even bumped inside over a guy like Tim Smith, who's not going to really beat anybody one-on-one or split any double teams doing pass rush, but he's somebody who's really solid play in the run and did it at a high level at Alabama. So I think that's a valuable thing to get in your roster. It's round 6. It's your second pick in round 6. You're not going to get, at best, you're getting somebody who you want to compete for a roster spot, and maybe not necessarily someone that you envision playing a huge role. So this was a hole on the roster. You had that spot where you need somebody to be able to fill in for specifically those Grover Stewart snaps, who's also the run stopper on the team. And really, that's just going to be his niche, and you kind of hope that this is a guy that can carve out a long career doing that and doing that one thing well, because I think that's essentially what his ceiling is.
Yeah, and I mean, he played plenty of snaps. I mean, he had 453 total, but he had 237 run, 216 pass.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the Crimson Tide really valued him as a run defender. Had a 78.9 run defense grade. And hey, something else that he did is he didn't put an otherworldly amount, but he put 11 pressures on the quarterback, came up with a couple sacks, had a couple hurries. He did his job. His role is going to be the one technique. It's going to be backing up Grover Stewart. It's going to be backing up DeForest Buckner. Maybe him and Gallimore are in at certain times. But what really sticks out is it's kind of similar to the tight ends, not as bad. You got to look back to Taven Bryan, who, again, I know he's not a very good defensive tackle, first round bust by all accounts, but the Colts really didn't use him in the correct manner. I'll never forget when they were talking to him and he said, "I'm not really sure why I'm being used the way I am." So, it's hard to fault him. And then Raekwon Davis was a revolving door. So,
and this is the first guy at defensive tackle in a long time that they've gotten that's really just primarily a run defender. Even going back to Eric Johnson, Curtis Brooks, guys you have on the roster right now, Neville Gallimore, Adetomiwa Adebawore, these are not run stoppers, and not really. It saves you from making the same mistake with Neville Gallimore that you made with Taven Bryan, where you don't have to force him into that role just because you don't have any other bodies. You don't have to play Adetomiwa Adebawore at nose tackle, which is absolutely ridiculous. If anything, I think he'd be better outside as an edge rusher than he would at tackle, just with his athleticism and his pass rush ability and his absolute inability to stop the run. So, yeah, really just a skill set that was completely missing from the defensive line room, and maybe that wasn't something that Gus Bradley really prioritized, but very clear Lou Anarumo had a different mold in mind for his backup one tech.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, they needed this. They needed a rotational guy. They needed someone who can help stop the interior runs. We'll see, but I think that when you're looking for just a role-playing defensive tackle, it's okay, I guess, to be in the 6th round. I'm still a little bit against it. I don't know. It would have just been a little bit nicer to get a defensive tackle a little sooner. But hey, if he can stop the run, you're perfectly fine there. So we're going to go ahead and get, before any of this, to Yim's super chat.
Yep.
I think Hunter Wohler, could be a sneaky good pick of the draft. Versatile safety with experience at linebacker, could compete for the coverage linebacker role. He's a dog. So to Yim's point here, the last pick of the draft was the one and only Wisconsin alum, Hunter Wohler, which that is Chris Ballard's alma mater. Chris Ballard loves Wisconsin guys. Look no further than Jonathan Taylor. Look no further than Tanner Bortolini. I mean, he likes Wisconsin guys, and he's very close with that organization. So this is a guy who really can, like Yim said, he can do both. I think he's more of a linebacker. But I mean, do you think that this is going to be a guy that might just be a special teamer, or do you think that he could actually potentially, I guess, be morphed into a dual threat type guy that they're just trying to find a position for?
Yeah, I think it's going to be special teams year one, and I don't think you should really rely on anything else. He was announced as a linebacker, so it's obvious they want to play with a little bit of the flexibility there because they announced him as a linebacker, and yet Chris Ballard compared him to Daniel Sorensen of the Chiefs while he was there, who was a safety. So this is somebody who's going to fill essentially that Trevor Denbo role for you in year one. Similar build, similar traits. Yeah, just might it's going to be that guy who's going to play on the interior of your special teams units, where you've got Doolin, Ballantyne, maybe Womack outside as the gunners, and then Hunter Wohler is going to be maybe that guy that's replacing a Grant Stewart type for you last year, or replace some of those Cam McGrone snaps that it's on special teams, and then really. It's interesting to talk about that and is just his flexibility at both linebacker and safety because those are both spots that you could use some depth. I think best case scenario, he has the ability to compete there for linebacker 4 with Cam McGrone. Worst case, he'll probably be linebacker 5, and then at safety, you're competing at safety 3 just because of the lack of depth there. At least at this point, until you add some more bodies, probably veterans, before you head into training camp. But yeah, I think they're going to be flexible with him because they can afford to be flexible with him, rely on him to be a special teams contributor. But really, you have needs at depth spots at both linebacker and safety. So why not get a guy that can do both?
Yeah, and I like it because if he can somehow find his way and lose defense,
Mm-hmm.
that's incredibly valuable to be able to be bounced back and forth. You kind of saw that a little bit with Ronnie Harrison.
Yeah.
Excuse me, but like he also was a little bit, I think, more effective as a at least in his career as a safety. But for the Colts, he came away with some
Yeah.
turnovers at linebacker. So um, this is a pick though that he's going to start out on special teams. Okay, he's gonna be a guy that's just going to be shown the special teams ways. He's going to make a name for himself through there. That's how he's going to have to do it. But again, Chris Ballard, right? Will Fries, seventh rounder. Rodney Thomas, he's no longer a starter, but when he did start, he was a seventh rounder. Zaire Franklin, seventh rounder. So Ballard has a way of finding like value in a seventh round pick.
Yeah.
So who knows what this guy's going to become? Those last like 3 or 4 rounds, that's where Ballard really starts cooking, and he's really at his best, honestly, when he's picking linebackers and late in the draft. Those are the two things that he just does so well. So at the end of the day, what do we? Let me see here. Yeah, so this is a great question to close the show. What would we give this? Like, how would so? That'll be another episode, Silence though. But let's just talk about overall. What are our feelings on the draft class? I'll let you start.
Yeah. I think you're never going to lose the draft. I don't think. That's one other joke. Just
It's hard to.
scrolling through X and seeing all these grades. Like the highest it gets is a normal A, and the lowest it gets is a B minus. Nobody's giving any C's out for the draft because everyone's getting better, right? I think it's just based on the opportunity cost that you had to get at other positions. I think if you're just starting out round one, the grade's got to be high because of that. I like that they address defensive line, even though it was more of a high floor pick than a high ceiling pick. At edge. And there were definitely some spots that I would have liked to have seen addressed earlier. Safety, I still don't feel happy about the safety room. Linebacker, even though I know that they're happy with Jalen Carlisle and Chris Ballard has talked up Shagun Alubi. Lou Anarumo's defense is going to employ 2 linebackers more often than Gus Bradley's did. So maybe it's not as big of a need there, but still, I don't like the idea of a second year former 5th round pick who's playing the position for the first time last year, being your unquestioned starter going into the season. I would have liked to have some more competition there, and maybe you could do that and add some more competition via free agency at the end. So yeah, there's still needs to address, but overall, I like the players that they add. I like the positions they added them at.
Yeah, I mean, you got yourself a safety linebacker hybrid taking a dart throw on him. You got yourself a run stopper. It's still kind of a dart throw.
Yeah.
You got yourself that third quarterback, which look, with Richardson's injury history, okay, he goes down, you've got one. You have one quarterback,
Mhm.
right? So, and you don't want that guy that's next up in that situation to be Jason Bean. I'm sorry. I know that there's the Bean Machine crew out there. Look, No. So then you've got yourself that running back that you need. He's more of a 3 down type. Then you've got the swing tackle because you don't trust Blake Freeland. Then you've got, even though it's a little controversial, you've got your slot corner, and a guy who has outside prowess because that's all he did. That's all Justin Wally did at Minnesota was outside coverage. So they can move him inside, and I think that's going to be the intention. Then you've got yourself an edge rusher that has the potential to rise up and be more than a second-round pick. Maybe a first-round talent in Tuimoloau. So we'll have to see what happens there. And then, of course, you got yourself a potential superstar in Tyler Warren. And I say potential superstar. All these guys have potential. So we'll have to see. I personally think it was a good draft. Was it great? No. It's very hard, though, to have picks more than 5 or 6 picks and have considered a great, phenomenal, incredible draft.
Yeah.
There's going to be some of these guys that people are going to go, oh, I don't like that. And most of these guys, I'd say, 3, 4, maybe 5 of these guys aren't going to work out. That's just, Juju Brent's a second-round pick, people. So, but that's our show, everybody. Thank you so, so very much. Patrick says it's the worst draft since 2019. Ooh, boy, hopefully not. Hopefully that's not the case. But Donald, Patrick, thank the super chats. Patrick, Truitt, Yim, thank you so much, you guys. I hope I'm not missing any. Wyatt, NFL Nerd, all of you guys, Teresa, Chet, Chris, Tony, all of you guys were absolutely legends. And sorry if I'm missing anybody. Sean and Tracy. I think I might have already said Tracy, but thank you so much, guys, for joining us. Like the Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook. Follow Indianapolis Colts on SI on SI. Then on X, we're at Colts _SI. Of course, subscribe to the YouTube channel, Horseshoe Huddle, and click that bell to turn on the notifications. If you want to listen to the Horseshoe Huddle podcast, just subscribe to us on Apple, Spotify, wherever else you listen to podcasts. So we're going to keep this train rolling with Draft Talk, baby. Next time that we're on air on Thursday, we are going to grade each one of these picks. We kind of went into depth. We kind of talked about, the description, what we thought, but now we're actually going to throw some grades, and we're not just going to keep it. I'd like to think we keep it open to anything past a B- as well. So we'll have to see. But until then, everybody have a wonderful Monday. Have a great week, and we will be seeing you all again on Thursday night.